For decades, Canada has relied on powerful allies and proven aircraft to defend one of the largest airspaces on Earth. From the Cold War era CF-18 Hornets to today's intense debate over the F-35, Canada's fighter jet decisions have always been about more than speed and firepower. They're about cost, sovereignty, and survival in one of the harshest operating environments on the planet. But recently, an unexpected aircraft has entered the conversation, and it's turning heads in Ottawa: the Swedish JAS-39 Gripen. At first glance, the Gripen doesn't look like a jet that should shock a G7 nation. It's smaller than the F-35. It doesn't carry the same stealth mystique, and it comes from a country with a fraction of Canada's defense budget. Yet, when Canadian officials, analysts, and pilots began looking closely at what the Gripen can actually do, the reaction was surprising. Because the Gripen wasn't designed for wars overseas, it was designed for survival. Sweden built the Gripen with one brutal assumption: air bases will be destroyed, runways will be cratered, pilots will have minutes, not hours, to launch, land, refuel, rearm, and disappear again. And that philosophy aligns almost perfectly with Canada's reality in the Arctic. The Gripen can operate from highways. It can be serviced by a small crew. It can refuel and rearm in under 10 minutes. And it can do all of this in freezing temperatures where many jets struggle just to start. For Canada, this is a big deal. Canada's Arctic air defense is stretched thin. Vast distances, limited infrastructure, and extreme weather make traditional air operations incredibly expensive. The Gripen's low operating cost, often estimated at less than half of fifth-generation fighters, suddenly looks very attractive. But cost alone isn't what shocked Canada. It's capability. The latest Gripen E is equipped with an AESA radar, advanced electronic warfare systems, and one of the most powerful data link networks in the world. Gripens don't fight alone, they fight as a network. Each jet shares sensor data with others, with ground radar, and even with naval units, creating a real-time combat picture that rivals much larger platforms. In exercises, this has produced uncomfortable results. Gripens have repeatedly demonstrated the ability to detect, track, and engage advanced opponents using smart tactics rather than brute force. Instead of relying on stealth alone, the Gripen uses electronic warfare to confuse enemies, disrupt radar systems, and strike from unexpected angles. For Canadian planners, this raised a serious question. Do we need the most expensive jet, or the most effective one for our environment? The Gripen also offers something politically sensitive: sovereignty. Sweden has shown willingness to allow deep local control over software, weapons integration, and upgrades. For Canada, this means less dependence on foreign approval to modify or deploy its own aircraft. And then there's logistics. Canada doesn't just defend cities, it defends emptiness. Remote bases, icy runways, and long response times define its air force. The Gripen was practically built for this kind of war. Minimal ground support, rapid turnaround, high availability rates even in poor conditions. Suddenly, the small fighter didn't look small anymore. It looked smart. This doesn't mean the Gripen will replace Canada's future fighter plans overnight. Politics, alliances, and long-term strategy all play a role. But the shock came from realization, not hype. A realization that modern air combat isn't just about stealth and price tags. It's about readiness, adaptability, and being able to fight tomorrow, not just look powerful on paper. The Gripen didn't overpower Canada. It didn't outspend Canada. It outthought expectations. And that's why Canada is shocked. Because sometimes, the most dangerous fighter isn't the biggest one in the sky. It's the one built to survive when everything goes wrong.
But the story doesn't end with shock. Because once the initial surprise faded,
Canada began asking harder questions. Questions that go far beyond one aircraft. What kind of air force does Canada actually need in the next 30 to 40 years? Modern air combat is changing fast. Drones, cyber warfare, electronic attacks, and long-range missiles are rewriting the rules. In this new reality, the Gripen's design philosophy suddenly feels less like a compromise and more like a warning. The Gripen was built for constant conflict, not occasional deployment, not perfect conditions, but sustained pressure. In high-intensity scenarios, availability matters more than perfection. A jet that's grounded for maintenance is useless, no matter how advanced it looks on paper. And this is where the Gripen quietly outperforms expectations. Gripen squadrons are designed to keep flying even when supply chains are disrupted. Parts are modular, maintenance is simplified. Pilots are trained to operate with minimal support. This kind of resilience matters deeply to Canada, especially in the Arctic, where help can be hundreds of kilometers away. Another concern is response time. Canadian intercept missions often involve unidentified aircraft approaching NORAD airspace. Speed to scramble, time on station, and fuel efficiency become critical. The Gripen's quick launch capability and low fuel burn allow it to stay airborne longer without relying heavily on tanker support. That's not flashy, but it's decisive. And then there's training. Gripen pilots train using real-time simulation integrated directly into the aircraft. Electronic threats, enemy radar systems, and missile scenarios can be simulated mid-flight without additional hardware. This allows pilots to train for near-peer combat without the massive costs normally associated with advanced exercises. For Canada, this could mean better prepared pilots at a fraction of the price. Still, the debate is far from settled. Some argue that fifth-generation stealth is non-negotiable in future wars. Others point out that no aircraft fights alone anymore, and that networks, sensors, and tactics matter just as much as radar cross-section. What the Gripen has done is disrupt certainty. It forced Canada to re-examine assumptions, to question whether prestige equals performance, and to consider whether flexibility might matter more than raw technological dominance. In a world where conflicts can escalate in hours, not years, readiness becomes power. And readiness is exactly where the Gripen thrives. So while Canada's final decision may still lie ahead, one thing is already clear. The Gripen didn't just enter the discussion, it changed it. And once expectations are challenged, there's no going back.
And now, the conversation shifts from capability to consequence. Because choosing a fighter jet is never just a military decision. It is an economic decision, a political decision, and a strategic message to the world. For Canada, the Gripen question exposed a deeper dilemma: independence versus integration. Canada is a core member of NORAD and NATO, tightly linked to the United States defense network. Any future fighter must seamlessly operate alongside American assets, satellites, AWACS, tankers, and fifth-generation aircraft. Critics of the Gripen argue that only a jet like the F-35 can fully integrate into this ecosystem. But supporters of the Gripen point to a different reality. Modern warfare is not a single, centralized system. It is a web. The Gripen was designed from day one to plug into multiple networks, share data across platforms, and adapt quickly to new threats. Its open architecture software allows faster upgrades, quicker integration of new weapons, and less dependence on a single supplier. For Canada, this flexibility matters. Threats are no longer limited to bombers and fighters. Hypersonic weapons, long-range cruise missiles, and electronic attacks challenge traditional air defense. In such an environment, reaction speed and information dominance become more valuable than raw stealth.
And this is where the Gripen quietly makes its strongest case. The Gripen E's electronic warfare suite is among the most advanced ever fitted to a non-stealth fighter. It doesn't just avoid detection, it actively attacks the enemy's sensors. Radar confusion, false targets, and signal disruption allow the Gripen to shape the battlefield before a missile is ever fired. In simulations and multinational exercises, this capability has shown that survival is not always about invisibility. Sometimes it's about control. Another factor Canada cannot ignore is sustainability. High-end fighters demand high-end budgets. Maintenance hours, specialized facilities, and expensive upgrades can slowly reduce fleet availability over time. For a country with limited numbers of aircraft covering massive territory, even small drops in readiness have serious consequences. The Gripen, by contrast, is built around availability. More jets in the air, more pilots current, more sorties per day. This isn't about winning a single battle, it's about staying in the fight. Canada's Arctic reality adds urgency to this logic. As polar ice melts, new air and sea routes are opening. Strategic competition in the region is increasing. Surveillance, interception, and presence missions will become more frequent, not less. And these missions demand endurance. They demand aircraft that can launch quickly, operate far from major bases, and return safely in extreme conditions. The Gripen was tested for exactly this kind of environment, long before it entered Canada's discussion. Still, no choice is without risk. Adopting a less common platform comes with political pressure, alliance expectations, and long-term planning challenges. Canada must balance its own needs against the demands of coalition warfare and shared defense commitments. But the shock caused by the Gripen was never about replacing allies. It was about redefining priorities. The realization that air power in the 21st century may favor adaptability over extravagance, that smart design can sometimes outperform sheer scale, and that survivability is as much about logistics and people as it is about technology. The Gripen did not force a decision. It forced a rethink. And for Canada, that rethink may be the most important outcome of all. Because in the next conflict, the winner may not be the nation with the most expensive jet, but the one that can keep flying when others cannot.